Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hello friends, today we have a Feldon of the Third Path deck tech for you. This is a budget deck tech, specifically 1DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the Commander, who can be up to $5. This is a discard strategy, reanimation strategy, so we want to discard cards from our own hand, and then use Feldon's ability to bring them back from the graveyard. We want to especially highlight cards, creatures with enter the battlefield triggers, as well as leave the battlefield or die triggers, because Feldon's ability says pay 2 and a red, tap Feldon, and create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, and then we get to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So that creature is going to get sacrificed, so draw triggers or leaves the battlefield triggers and enter the battlefield triggers are all good for us. We just want to get a lot of value off of Feldon, hopefully getting big things out for less than they would normally cost us. As always, we're going to start out by talking about Accelerants. These are the cards that are going to help us get into our game plan a little faster. And then we'll talk about cards that are specific to our game plan, the cards that interfere with our opponent's game plans, as well as the cards that provide us consistency, and lastly, the lands in the deck that help us to play the cards that are in our deck, as well as help us execute our game plan. So, for Accelerants, we got the Mana Rocks, Pristine Talisman, Heraldic Banner, and Darksteel Ingot. Darksteel Ingot's indestructible. Heraldic Banner gives all of our red creatures +1/+0, and Pristine Talisman gives us a little bit of life, which is nice. Unstable Obelisk, Hedron Archive, both tap for colorless or 2 colorless, and we can sacrifice them to either destroy a permanent or draw a couple cards. Manolith can help us to tap for a red, just a 3 to cast Mana Rock there. Armillary Sphere, Pilgrim's Eye, and Mycosynth Wellspring, while not true Accelerants, they do help us smooth out our land drops. Armillary Sphere is going to pluck a couple lands from our graveyard or from our library to our hand. Pilgrim Eye gets 1, and Mycosynth Wellspring can get us 1 as well when it enters, as well as when it leaves. We do have a couple cards that allow us to sacrifice artifacts for some kind of a benefit, so we're hoping to have Mycosynth Wellspring on the battlefield when that happens. Lastly, for Accelerants, we have Hazoret's Monument, which is a cost reducer, making all of our red creatures cost 1 less, and also goes with our game plan, allowing us to discard a card and draw extra cards. Dreamstone Hedron is a 6 to cast Mana Rock, so pretty expensive there, but it can tap for 3 colorless. We can also sack it to draw some cards. Alright, getting into our game plan. So these are creatures we want to get out and hopefully bring back. These ones all give us tokens. Tuk Tuk the Explorer gives us a 5/5 artifact creature. Pia and Kieran Nalar give us a couple of Thopters, and we can sacrifice those Thopters to deal damage, kind of controlling the board. Siege Gang Commando is along the same lines, but instead of getting Thopters, we get 3 Goblins, and we can also use the Siege Gang Commando's ability to control the board a little bit. Bigger drops, so these are more impactful cards that we want to try to bring back, are Mere Battlesphere, gives us a bunch of tokens, and then we can swing with the Mere Battlesphere to just deal automatic damage, which is great. Molten Primordial is a 6/4 who can steal a creature from each opponent. This can really be detrimental to any one player we want to deal a ton of damage to. Zealous Conscripts is like a baby Primordial in that when it comes in, we get to gain control of 1 permanent, usually a creature of an opponent's to swing with, but sometimes there's other permanents that we want to steal as well. Scuttling Doom Engine is another card that's great for recurring. It's a 6/6 that can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and when it dies, we get to deal 6 damage to an opponent or a planeswalker. Fury Storm, I put it under game plan because I'm probably going to be using it to protect Feldon. Feldon's going to be, our opponent's target, as he's kind of our path to victory, and so if they're targeting us, we have Feldon out, we can actually use Fury Storm to protect him, and then we get 2 redirects. So if they're just playing this card, destroy target creature, we could actually copy it and send it somewhere else 2 times, which is great. If Feldon's been out more than that, more than once, we get more copies off of it. Elixir of Immortality just gains us some life and allows us to shuffle our graveyard back into our library, protecting us from an opponent who wants to exile our graveyard. Cards that are going to provide interference, Collective Defiance, Shrapnel Blast, and Dismissive Pyromancer are all going to allow us to deal damage to our opponent's stuff. Collective Defiance, we probably want to do both modes, at least the first and second mode on Collective Defiance when we cast it, because we get to discard our entire hand to draw that many cards. The Dismissive Pyromancer we can bring back over and over again with Feldon to deal 4 damage to a creature, although it is really expensive in that it would cost 6 mana. Oh, I should also note the Shrapnel Blast does force us to sacrifice an artifact, which we actually do want to do in a few cases because we get benefit from doing so. So if we can't sacrifice an artifact when we have Shrapnel Blast out, no big deal. We have lots of ways to cycle cards in our hand, and so you can just cycle Shrapnel Blast away. Goblin Charbelcher allows us to deal damage to a target depending on what we mill off the top of our deck. Or not mill, but what we reveal off the top of our deck. Flametown Kavu comes in and deals 4 damage, something great for recurring from our graveyard. Fateful Showdown allows us to discard our hand, deal damage equal to the cards we discarded, and then draw that many cards. So a great way to get rid of a utility or medium-sized creature, as well as put stuff in our own graveyard. Where Ancients Tread and Warstorm Surge allow us to deal damage when creatures enter our battlefield, as long as they have power 5 or more. Where Ancients Tread triggers. Spite Bellow is the one who leaves the battlefield and deals 6 damage to a creature. If you had all of these out, you'd be able to deal a lot of damage when Spite Bellows enters. Also great to be able to bring back. Not a bad target to evoke or cycle. Tyrant's Familiar, as long as Feldon's out, is going to be able to deal 7 damage on attack to any creature defending player controls. That's going to be enough to get rid of most problematic creatures. Spawn of Thraxus and Bogardan Hellkite both enter and deal damage to either one target with Spawn of Thraxus, damage equal to the number of mountains we control, and then Bogardan Hellkite deals 5, divided how we choose. Mizium Mortar, Starstorm, and Chain Reaction are all board wipes. Mizium Mortars only hits creatures with toughness 4 or less. Starstorm deals damage to each creature equal to how much we want to pay mana into it. We can also cycle it. And then Chain Reaction costs 4 and deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So once the board gets convoluted enough, we can cast Chain Reaction and wipe everybody's creatures out. Shenanigans and the Ingot Chewer allow us to destroy artifacts. We can also dredge Shenanigans if there's a really big problematic artifact, or we can use Feldon to bring Ingot Chewer back from the graveyard to destroy an artifact when it enters. Volcanic Offering is just great removal. We're going to get rid of 2 non-basics that cause problems for us and our opponents, as well as 2 creatures with 7 toughness or less that are causing problems for us as well as our opponent. Further interference, Meteor Golems, when it enters, just gets rid of any permanent. We can bring that back over and over with Feldon if we need to. We also have Jaya Ballard, who's kind of great utility. She can either destroy blue permanents, lightning bolt something, or has a board wipe of her own in that she can deal 6 damage to each creature and each player. Each of those abilities does cost a different amount of mana and forces us to discard a card from our hand, but a lot of value to be had if you can use Jaya Ballard. Cards that are going to provide us consistency. So we have a bunch of cards that allow us to cycle our hand, such as Cathartic Reunion, Tormenting Voice, Honor of the God Pharaoh. We do get a zombie creature, which is great, an army from the Honor of the God Pharaoh, but mostly we want to use these cards to put the high converted mana cost creatures into our graveyard so that we can bring them back with Feldon. More ways that we're going to cycle through our hand. Key to the City allows us to cycle a card and then makes one of our creatures unblockable. When it untaps, we can pay 2 to draw a card. Sorry, discard a card and cycle a card. Blah, blah, blah. My bad. Key to the City allows us to discard a card and make something unblockable. When it untaps, we can pay 2 and draw a card, which would be the cycling part. We do have a lot of basics, I believe 37 mountains in this deck, so Tectonic Reformation is a great fit here in that it makes each of our lands have land cycling or just cycling for red mana, which is great. Otherwise, we can cycle Tectonic Reformation away ourselves. Rummaging Goblin allows us to cycle a card every turn by tapping it to discard something to draw something new. So great ways to get those high CMCs into our graveyard. Pirate's Pillage does more cycling but gives us a couple treasures while it's at it. Dragon Mage, as long as it gets in for combat damage, allows each player to discard their hand, or forces each player to discard their hand and get a new grip of 7, which is great for us because it gives us more options and sends more things to the graveyard. Hoarding Dragon allows us to tutor up an artifact, and when Hoarding Dragon leaves, or dies should I say, we get to put that exiled artifact into our hand. Ichor Wellspring is going to draw us a card, and then we can sacrifice it later to draw another card. Filigree Familiar gains us a couple life and draws us a card when it enters. Treasure Keeper is a 3/3 that when it dies, we get to reveal cards from the top of our library till we reveal a creature or card with CMC 3 or less, and then we just get to put that card right onto the battlefield. So that's a great target for Feldon. A lot of utility to be had there. Outpost Siege, we're going to try and choose Cons, most likely, as that's going to give us an extra card off the top of our library that we could potentially play each turn. Since we're discarding so much, we can get to the point where we are playing off the top of our deck, top decking. So Lore Seeker Stone is great in that for 3 mana we can draw 3 cards, or maybe just a little bit more. Staff of Nin is another one that helps keep our deck going, drawing us a card at the beginning of each turn and dealing the damage to any target. Shreds of Sanity gets an instant or sorcery back from our graveyard to our hand. We have to discard a card or exile Shreds of Sanity as well as discard a card when we cast it. Mindclaw Shaman plucks an instant or sorcery from an opponent's hand, so also not a bad target for Feldon. And then we talked about Feldon himself. As far as lands, we have Dormant Volcano, which helps us in the long game. Comes in tapped. We have to bounce a mountain to our hand, but then we can tap the volcano for a colorless and a red. Temple of the False God, along the same lines, taps for 2 colorless as long as we have 5 or more lands. Sequestered Stash allows us to get artifacts back from our graveyard on top of our library so that it's our next draw. Forgotten Cave and Smoldering Crater are both cards that provide red mana for us, but we can also cycle them when we don't need to. And then, like I said, we have 37 mountains. A lot of fun to play this deck. You can continue to bring stuff back and get a lot of value as long as Feldon stays on the battlefield. But he is a big target for removal if your opponents kind of see what's going on. The average CMC of this deck is a little bit deceiving in that it's 3.98, which is on the quite a bit higher end, but know that we're planning to be discarding those cards, so it's not really a true assessment of what the average CMC is. You're going to curve out fine. You have 12 2-drops, 15 3-drops, so you should do okay there. Give this deck a go and let me know how you liked it, if this seems like your cup of tea. Otherwise, let me know what commander you'd like to see next. Hope you enjoyed this video. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you should like the video. You can subscribe by hitting the icon in the top left. YouTube thinks you'll like the video on the top right. Otherwise, you can check out one of the playlists on the bottom. Have a great day.